From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
From the State of the Union to Union Station, former Congressman David Cicilline now leads the Rhode Island Foundation, and after a year and a half on the job, he's begun rolling out his plan for the future of the foundation and its $1.5 billion endowment. How does he plan to put his stamp on one of the state's most influential organizations? This week on Newsmakers, Rhode Island Foundation President and CEO David Cicilline. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi, and we welcome the president and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation, David Cicilline. Before we get going, we want to disclose that the Rhode Island Foundation is a supporter of Newsmakers as an underwriter. And I also want to say, normally you're a former member of Congress. We would call you Congressman, but for the purposes of this show, we're going to call you David.
Absolutely.
I've only known you with a fancy honorific, so this will be an adjustment.
It's good to have my name back.
I've been calling you a title a long time
Exactly. So look, a lot of people watching this have heard of the Rhode Island Foundation, but maybe don't understand what it does. In 60 seconds, how would you describe the nonprofit and its mission?
Sure. So the Rhode Island Foundation is Rhode Island's only community foundation. We're one of the oldest and largest community foundations in the country. We've been around for 108 years. Community foundations are really organizations where folks can bring their resources, their incredible generosity, to have an impact on the state, to improve the lives of all Rhode Islanders. And the way a community foundation works is people will create a fund or make a contribution to the Rhode Island Foundation. We invest that in an endowment that we have, and then we take a responsible share of that endowment each year to invest in the important priorities facing our state to improve the lives of all Rhode Islanders, so that we have resources today to deal with challenges today, but also for all future generations. So it's a way to be sure that you can have the greatest impact, making the biggest difference in improving the lives of Rhode Islanders. The Rhode Island Foundation is a community foundation that belongs to the community, and because of the incredible generosity of Rhode Islanders for more than 100 years, we've been able to have a real impact on our state.
One more on how the foundation works. You put out the book every year that shows which funds. There are funds, some industrialist in 1910 put some money in, or 1920, and it said this has to go to Dogs Forever or something like that. How much are you and the board deciding where money should go at the Rhode Island Foundation versus, someone put a bequest in for in perpetuity toward this one cause in Newport or whatever it is?
So last year, the Rhode Island Foundation gave grants totaling almost $90 million. About 2/3 of that is donor-directed grant making.
Strings attached, essentially.
Yeah, and about 1/3 of it is discretionary grant making from the foundation. The good news is, we have an opportunity to help shape the way our donors think about where they should make those investments, so they rely on us. If they say, we're interested in education, we can say, we're funding these 5 things, why don't you co-fund with us or align your funding with us? So we try to influence the generosity through the donor-advised funds, but because of our age, we have a larger discretionary budget than most community foundations because we've been around for a long time and people trust us. But we also try, when people create a fund, and that's the beauty of the Rhode Island Foundation, you can create something for a geographic area. If you live in South County or the northern part of the state, you can create something for a particular purpose, for education. You can create it to fund a particular organization. So there's a whole range of opportunities to really make sure your philanthropy is done in a way which meets your needs and your interests, but also the needs of Rhode Island.
So the Rhode Island Foundation is out with its 5-year plan. If people want to really get in depth with it, they can go to the Rhode Island Foundation website and check it out. But what are your key priorities moving forward?
So the important thing is this plan has been developed over the last year and a half, and what's really different at this time, or something that I'm most proud of, is that we really wanted to ensure that this plan was not just my ideas or even the great team at the Rhode Island Foundation. We wanted to be certain that Rhode Islanders shared their views about the greatest challenges they faced and the greatest opportunities. And so we spent time both in community gatherings, in community dinners, focus groups, individual interviews, polling, surveys. In the end, over 2,000 Rhode Islanders contributed to the contents of this report, this plan. And so what we identified is a number of priorities that have been priorities of the Rhode Island Foundation: educational success of young people, ensuring Rhode Islanders have access to high-quality health care and affordable health care. Economic opportunity or economic mobility and housing remain really important priorities for the foundation. And and ensuring that this is all done with diversity, equity, inclusion, so that we're including all Rhode Islanders in all these areas remains an important part of our work. The two areas where I think you'll see more emphasis that we do some work in, but we heard time and time again for Rhode Islanders, is on climate action. People want the Rhode Island Foundation to play a greater role in making sure we're prepared.
So what would that look like?
So, we're going to begin to raise resources to devote to a whole range of climate action matters. We're working closely with the state in the development of a climate action plan to mitigate the consequences of climate. Some of it might be things like food waste, which is a big issue, and there's some exciting stuff happening in Rhode Island supporting that. Some of it is to work with the state in the development of their plan to reduce our carbon emissions, resilience with local cities and towns who need a lot of planning work to be done. So the other area that we heard a lot about, which is kind of uniquely, I think, a unique position for community foundations, is people said, can the Rhode Island Foundation do more to bridge some of the divides? There's this terrible division in our country. People feel it in Rhode Island. They feel it sometimes with their neighbors. Can we do something to help bring people together to develop a greater sense of community and more kind of civic engagement? This is something Rhode Island Foundation is perfectly positioned to do, and that is investing in things like civics education and supporting local journalism and media literacy and a range of other things that we're already doing. We're working now with a coalition with an organization called More Perfect and the Rockefeller Foundation and CF Leads that I now sit on the board of. We're going to take the plan that we've developed to improve the civic health of Rhode Island and use it as a template to help other community foundations around the country invest in this. And this is something that people desperately want. They want to feel connected again to their neighbors. They want to be sort of part of a community where people care about each other. That's what community foundations do every day. So those are the two areas that I think you'll see more work in our 5-year action plan.
I have to ask, you mentioned there, you talked about diversity, equity, inclusion. You're well aware that in the wake of the election in particular, we've seen companies, some colleges backing away from sort of formal DEI programs, language, whether because they feel the new administration isn't going to like that, because they feel it has led to backlash and isn't actually effectuating that. Why have you thought about all of those reactions as you move forward in this, and why are you still on board with it?
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting, if you think about DEIA, it often reminds me of the way people used to talk about Obamacare. They were very much against it, but then you went through the provisions about making sure your kids could stay on your health insurance till they're 26 and have covered pre-existing conditions, and they loved all the provisions of it. It's the same thing with DIA. That word has taken on certain meaning, but when you ask most Rhode Islanders, I think most Americans, do they think we should have programs that include everyone, that have diverse voices, that have that include people of different abilities? People say yes, they want. So that's central to the work of the Rhode Island Foundation. We're here to serve all Rhode Islanders, and if we're going to make real progress in education or in healthcare or economic opportunity, we have got to deal with some of the disparities that exist based on race and opportunity. So that's a central part of our work. I'm very proud that our board continues to believe that's important. It will be evidence in all the work we do in the different 6 community priorities that we've established, but we recognize that some people don't think that's a good idea, but it's hard to make progress.
And to that, and we have to go to a break, but as a follow-up to what you're saying there, are you concerned at all that it could scare off donors because it's politically charged, fair or not?
Yeah, look, I think it's hard to talk about work in education if you don't address the inequities that exist, the same in healthcare. And I think so long as you explain to people, this is about making sure that all of Rhode Island, every Rhode Islander has access to a high-quality education, to affordable, high-quality health care, that has a chance to get ahead, that has an opportunity to live in housing that's safe and affordable, that live in communities where they feel connected and that are responding to the issues of climate. That's something that every Rhode Islander cares about. And as long as you talk about the work in terms of making sure it's inclusive, diverse voices are heard, but we're committed to doing it in a fair way, I think most Rhode Islanders support that.
All right, we're going to take a break and we'll continue this conversation on the other side. And we are not letting him leave the studio without talking about politics. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is the president and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation, David Cicilline. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk to you about politics. You spent many years in politics. In just over a month, Donald Trump will be back in the White House. It was a clear victory for the former president. And not only did Democrats lose the White House, they failed to regain the House, and they lost the Senate. Where did Democrats go wrong?
Look, I'm not a political commentator. I think one of the things that I'm most excited about is this will be a moment, particularly for the next 4 years, where the role of a community foundation is going to be particularly important, because in times of uncertainty, in times of apprehension, community foundations are really safe harbors.
I get what you're doing, and good for you. You're very good. But look, the Democrats' messaging seems to have failed.
Yeah,
yes or no?
No, I actually, you know what, I think actually one of the big challenges we face in our country, and I think this was definitely something which impacted the outcome of this election, is something I feel very strongly about, is the ability today to share completely false information at scale in social media platforms. You know, if someone tried to make up a story on Channel 12 that was completely untrue, there's a whole system to prevent that from happening. You would get sued, and people would have to pay damages for the harm that came from that. Congress exempted. And
your license could be at risk with the SEC.
Right. The Congress exempted social media platforms from that requirement and gave them
Section 230.
Section 230. And so you have social media platforms that are designed and programmed through their algorithms to amplify the most toxic, most untrue, most horrible content, because it gets the deepest engagement, the most engagement, and produces the most money for the platform. Until we fix that, we have people that are making voting decisions based on completely false information because it's been shared at scale through social media platforms. This is a big problem. Congress needs to fix that. 230? Yeah, I mean, President Biden actually said in his campaign for the first time around was he favored repeal of it in its entirety. We've got to create a system where there's some accountability on the part of platforms for information which is untrue being shared at scale, and I think that's actually a big problem.
I'm sure there are people watching wondering, are you going to run for anything? I mean, do you see yourself back on a ballot at some point, or is that phase of your career over?
Look, I am really delighted and honored to be leading the Rhode Island Foundation. One of the things that is so exciting about the work of the Rhode Island Foundation, when you look at the 108 years, the impact it has had. We led the campaign on the bond for question 3, $120 million for affordable housing. We are doing important work in the area of education. So in terms of like a position where I can have a really positive impact on the state that I love, the Rhode Island Foundation is an incredible place, and I'm really lucky to be there. I feel fortunate. I'm going to work really hard to make sure we're having the biggest impact we can to improve the lives of most Rhode Islanders, and that's my commitment, and I'm going to stay really focused on that work.
Housing and homelessness is a big issue everywhere, but particularly in Rhode Island, and the pallet shelter in Providence has been long delayed. You're a member of the Housing Affordability Commission, which I actually did not know until yesterday, and there was a hearing on Thursday where you questioned the Rhode Island Housing Department about these delays. Let's take a quick listen. No, we'll get to it in a moment. But as you're about to hear, you were rather frustrated. Here we go.
When all of these issues arose, did anyone in the Department of Housing say, "Oh, we should come up with a proposal to facilitate this sort of approval process and bring something to the General Assembly"? The idea that this has not happened yet, and we still don't have a proposal from anybody in state government charged with facilitating this kind of project is alarming. We've had a year now. Everyone's acknowledging it didn't fit anything neatly, and we still don't have an idea that the General Assembly is being asked to approve something so we can do this with ease going forward, consistent with the provision of the code.
I can't speak.
So clearly you were frustrated there, David. Were you surprised that the Housing Department hadn't put together some legislation?
Well, look, I think particularly this has become an even higher priority for the Rhode Island Foundation. We created or led the effort for the housing report that was done by the Boston Consulting Group. This remains a really important priority in our 5-year action plan. And so my view is we have to do everything we can to create as much housing, both emergency housing and obviously long-term and real housing in Rhode Island. And this seemed like, it was an emergency that was created as a part of a response to COVID. This has been going on for years. And we ought to be figuring out how do we help make this happen. And the fact that it didn't fit into an existing provision of the code, well, then let's figure out how we craft something so that that's available going forward.
Have them, right?
Other states have them. How do they use it? So, look, I just think everyone has to be working as hard as they can to be sure we're doing everything we can to deal with the emergency of homelessness. There's been a 25% increase from last year to this year in terms of people in Rhode Island who are homeless. This is a crisis. This is not housing in terms of permanent housing. It's a temporary solution for some folks, so we get them out of the cold and into some housing. And I think everyone is frustrated. Like, what is taking so long? And I think everyone on the commission wanted to know that are there things we can do to help accelerate this process?
We only have about a minute left. I did want to ask you about a different role you've just taken on, which is President Biden just appointed you a member of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council. I believe you were sworn in this week as we're talking. Did you expect that, and what does it mean to you?
Yes, the president called me to tell me he was going to appoint me to that. It's great. This was created by Congress in 1980 to serve as a memorial to Holocaust victims and to be an education center. It opened in 1993. 40 million Americans have gone through the museum. It's really important today, not only as a memorial to the lives lost, but as an education center. It's a repository of all of the archives and all of the documents relating to the Holocaust. So it's a tremendous honor. I was delighted the president appointed me to it, and it's a great opportunity to reinforce how important it is to combat hate of any kind and what the consequences are to democracies when that is allowed to permeate. And
well, you have 20 seconds to do this. People want to get involved with the Rhode Island Foundation. How can they do that?
They can go to our website and learn more about the 5-year action plan. They can contribute to the Fund for Rhode Island, which will fund all of the work in this action plan. That's my next responsibility, to go out and raise the resources to do the work that we are intending to do, and to just become involved. Learn more about it. Go to RhodeIslandFoundation.org. Check out our website. And the good news is, whatever piece of this you're interested in, you can contribute to that work.
All right. David Cicilline, President and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation, thanks so much. When we come back, Attorney General Peter Neronha was a guest on 12 News at 4. What he had to say on the Washington Bridge. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. On Wednesday, Attorney General Peter Neronha was in our studio for a live interview on 12 News at 4 with Kim Kalunian. And Kim started with what is top of mind to many, the Washington Bridge.
So we've been told for months now, Attorney General, that there is sort of an internal forensic audit being done to figure out what went wrong, when, who knew about it. What is the status of that report?
Yeah, look, I mean, the accountability that you referred to was promised by the governor, and that's not my mission at all. My mission is to lead and succeed in the lawsuit that will hold companies that we allege are responsible for us getting to this place accountable. It's not my job, and it's not my mission, and it's certainly not my intention to look inside government, inside DOT, and try to find fault or lack of fault. I do think, though, and I understand the question, and it's a perfectly good one. The forensic audit, if you will, what happened here, is going to play out over the course of this litigation. That will be the principal defense, as I've sort of predicted for a long time now, even before we were involved in the case. The principal defense will be that DOT itself missed something or didn't follow advice or should have known themselves. And that in its own way will be its own insight into whether or not DOT did the right things or not. Of course, now we take the position that it was not DOT's responsibility, nor was it their fault, but that's going to be the position of the other side in this case. And so the public's going to see this play out over the next several years.
And so in terms of that forensic analysis, though, will the public ever get to see that? Is it a physical report?
Well, that's just it, Kim. I mean, I've never really known what was meant by the forensic analysis. Again, this predates me, and it has nothing to do with the litigation. The litigation is itself a forensic analysis.
So there's not like a document, a binder, a notepad with all this compiled?
No, not that I've seen. And not one that I would say, if you asked me for it and I could share it with you, I would. That's not to say that there aren't some reports that somewhere that suggest perhaps that person X or person Y should have seen X or Y. I'm not saying that exists. I'm not saying it doesn't. What I am saying is that before we started our involvement in this litigation, there were a lot of statements made by a lot of people in government for whom I have no authority over, nor do I want authority over them. That's really for them to answer. Our job is to do as good a job as we can with this lawsuit. I'm confident we're going to do that. We just won the tolling case recently. You know, regardless of how you feel about tolls, our job is to defend the decisions of the General Assembly and the governor. We did that successfully. I have a strong belief in the capability of our legal team, and the people of Rhode Island are going to be well served by that team.
I want to talk about some other stuff while I have you here. Today you made some news announcing you're taking a national company to court for charging renters illegal application fees. Can you give us a quick summary of what you're alleging?
Sure. This company, we allege, charged application fees for rental properties. Let's start with the premise. Housing is difficult to find here, right? We want to make renting as easy as possible for prospective tenants. The legislature passed a law last year that said you can't charge application fees. What you can charge for is for a background check. Either the tenant can bring their own background check done by our office, or the landlord can have that done. But what you can't charge is $200 or more as an application to try to get the apartment. This company's doing it over and over and over and over, sometimes multiple times. So they'll charge a fee and then deny the application. The person will try to fix whatever the so-called reason is for the denial. They apply again, get charged another fee, denied again. And so this is plainly unlawful under Rhode Island law. And we are the enforcement mechanism to make sure that everybody in Rhode Island has a fair shot at housing. If we start picking who ought to live in houses as opposed to who shouldn't, who ought to be able to rent and who shouldn't, that's just not right, and it's not fair, and our office is going to do something about it. And this is the first step in doing so, and there will be others to follow. And
we did reach out to that company, but so far we haven't heard back. I want to ask you about your political future. We've talked about it before. You told Rhode Island Public Radio that you're open to the idea of running for lieutenant governor. So let's start here. Should we bet on your name being on the ballot in 2026?
Well, look, you know, the only circumstances under which I would run for that office is if I could do it in partnership with someone who saw the world the way I saw it, made sure that I had the resources and the authority to move forward issues that I really care about, healthcare being first and foremost among them. I would not run for lieutenant governor in a vacuum. So there's a lot to still be decided. What I like about that office is it can be substantive if you make it that way. I am not at all interested in the trappings of, say, governor. That is not the ceremonial functions are something have no appeal to me. It's why I love being AG, is because I feel like we can impact the lives of Rhode Islanders in meaningful ways. You know, we can do that from a lieutenant governor's perch if the authority and the resources are there. I'm convinced I can find a partner. If I do, then the odds of me being involved there are pretty high. I love public service, but we'll see how things develop over the next couple of years.
So would you serve as lieutenant governor or consider running for lieutenant governor with Governor Dan McKee?
I think you know the answer to that. Look, I think we need a change, and I don't think that this governor is the agent of change. So the answer to that is a clear no. I think there will be other potential candidates for lieutenant governor, that will emerge, and I think the likelihood of me finding a partner there are pretty high.
All right, Attorney General Peter Neronha, we are out of time, but thanks as always for being here.
Thanks, Kim. Good to be with you.
Our thanks to Kim and AG Neronha. Our guest on the first half of the program, David Cicilline of the Rhode Island Foundation. If you missed any of it, it's on WPRI.com, or you can subscribe to our podcast. Thank you for watching. I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.